3, 2, 1. There we go. All right, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for showing up. Erika, Rodolfo, Matheus, João, and Rayane. This is our last meeting. Actually, I'm going to be here next week too, but only to correct exercises. So this is our last class. Let's say like this, okay? Last lecture. Well, good night, everybody. We are almost done, but as always, we still have some very, very interesting issues to discuss this week. Okay? So check this out. You can see the screen. What we are going to deal with is how to address extreme poverty and inequality. All right, now this is a big topic. I know there are lots and lots of things that can be said about poverty in general, about extreme poverty, and about inequality. This is a big issue in the 21st century. But we're going to try to look at those issues from the perspective of behavior economics, as always. Então, pessoal, claro que dá para se falar milhões de coisas, grandes discussões em torno dos assuntos, né, de pobreza extrema e de desigualdade. Mas a gente vai tentar abordar essa discussão, como de costume, falando de economia comportamental. O que a economia comportamental pode ajudar? Que tipo de aspectos da discussão que um economista da área de economia comportamental vai ter principal atenção, tá certo? Any questions before we start? Any suggestions? Complaints? Who knows? Alguém gostaria de falar alguma coisa, fazer alguma perguntinha antes da gente começar? All right. Thanks, Rodolfo. Yeah, it's okay. Now, we have suggested last week that you guys took a look at this film, right? Daniel Blake. Eu, Daniel Blake. Ao meu ver, é um filme extremamente provocativo. Tem algumas coisas ali que parecem meio forçadas, tem outras coisas que são muito reais e a gente precisa se dar conta. Então, nós vamos tentar falar um pouco sobre isso, sobre como que nessa virada do século, às vezes a gente acha que está ajudando, mas a gente precisa entender um pouco mais a condição da pobreza para tentar ajudar. Vou ser mais específico, tá? Não vou ficar no abstrato, não. Às vezes a tecnologia pode ser uma barreira para ajudar as pessoas em situação de pobreza, tá? Tá, então nós vamos tentar trazer essa discussão para cá dentro de alguns instantes, tá certo? All right, so what we know, we have like, oh, this is kind of an old news, but we still have like millions, maybe 15 or 18 million people in Brazil below the poverty line. Tá? Então são diferentes estimativas, tá, gente? Algumas pessoas falam que são ainda 15, 18 milhões de pessoas abaixo da linha da pobreza. And that means those people, they are very, very, very deprived of most of the things we need for basic dignity, you know, for life, for survival. All right. Now, but before we do, take a look at this picture. Now, if I ask you, where is this picture from? Which city in Brazil is the city? You can't tell. It's absolutely impossible to say, because that is a common image in most of the big cities in Brazil. You see people who are living in irregular areas. They live in constructions that are kind of vulnerable. Some of them are very unstable and they are actually dangerous. From time to time, we hear about these buildings collapsing. So what makes a person live in a situation like that? Well, obviously, it's only need. It's only when you have no other choice that you prefer to live in a place like this. And unfortunately, in Brazil, we have millions of people in that condition, okay? Now, even before we start talking about behavior economics, I want to bring back this very important concept in conventional economics and the discussion about poverty. The concept I want to bring up is poverty trap. It's written down here. Okay, so let me translate that to you because that is actually a very common expression in Portuguese too. Armadilha da pobreza. Does any of you remember what exactly is armadilha da pobreza? Alguém se lembra lá do curso de Economia 1, quando a gente falava de armadilha da pobreza? Alguém tem mais ou menos uma ideia do que seria a armadilha da pobreza? Não?
É tipo como se tivesse um povo que tivesse predestinado a ficar nessa linha da pobreza durante um tempo muito grande e tipo que tivesse que ser feito um esforço bem grande para poder sair dessa linha,
Uhum.
tipo a China e o que a China fez nesses últimos 50, 100 anos para poder sair dessa linha.
Ah, legal. Você trouxe dois pontos importantes aí. Eu vou refrescar a memória de todo mundo, Matheus, falando de onde vocês ouviram essa expressão a última vez, armadilha da pobreza. Vou tentar adivinhar aqui, tá? Pode ser que eu esteja errado. Mas eu acho que vocês ouviram essa expressão armadilha da pobreza quando a gente estava discutindo fronteiras de possibilidades de produção, FPPs. Então, eu vou lembrar aqui exatamente o que é isso, tá? Imagine que a gente tem um país em que ele pode produzir ou milho para alimento ou máquina, né? Um produto agrícola, um produto de consumo e um outro equipamento, um tipo de capital qualquer, capital físico, tá? Algum tipo de equipamento. Então, a gente costuma ver os países com fronteiras de possibilidade de produção. O que é isso? Significa que os países têm escolha se eles querem produzir mais capital ou mais alimento, mais bens de consumo ou mais bens de investimento. Então, eles podem escolher diferentes pontos sobre essa fronteira de possibilidades. Só que se os países estiverem em algum ponto dessa fronteira de possibilidades, significa que eles estão usando ao máximo os seus recursos, né? Não tem nada desempregado, não tem desperdício e tal. Então, é uma construção meio hipotética. Tá, tudo bem. Aqui parece que o país tem escolhas. Se ele quer ficar aqui no ponto A, consumir muito mais e produzir muito pouco equipamento, com isso acabar crescendo muito devagar, ou se ele quer ficar aqui no ponto C, ou no ponto D, sei lá, aqui bem abaixo, em que ele escolhe sacrificar muito do seu consumo, né? Consome muito pouco e usa todos os seus recursos para produzir capital. Então, com isso, ele vai ter muito máquina, muito equipamento sendo jogado na produção a cada ano, e aí o país cresce muito mais rápido, tá? All right, but poverty trap, armadilha da pobreza, happens when you have a country with very, very bad conditions in terms of technology. So, if you have this FPP here, se você está com essa fronteira de possibilidade de produção tão baixinha aqui, mesmo que você empregue todos os seus recursos, toda a terra, todos os equipamentos para produzir alimentos, você não consegue alimentar toda a população. Então, você não consegue sequer pensar na ideia de sacrificar consumo para aumentar a produção de alimentos. Então, um país como esse, passa 20 anos, ele está aqui. Passa 30 anos, ele está aqui. Passa 40 anos, ele está aqui. Ele não consegue fazer saltar as suas possibilidades de produção, porque ele está investindo muito pouco em capital, equipamentos, máquinas, que vão ampliar a capacidade de produção dele no próximo período. Então, é isso aqui que a gente chama de armadilha da pobreza. Quando um país está em tamanha situação de privação, que mesmo usando todos os seus recursos produtivos, ele mal consegue gerar alimentos para as pessoas. Quanto mais pensar em construir fábricas, criar guindastes, tratores, essas coisas. All right, so that's the concept of poverty trap. And this is not new. This is a very old concept, okay? But now we are in the 21st century. So we are not only worried about physical capital, about structures, about machines, about equipment. Now, when we talk about poverty trap, we are also concerned with human capital. In the 21st century, it's not only the amount of machines, the number of factories that will, say how wealthy this population can be, but it's also the amount of knowledge, the amount of skills, all of those things that we associate with the term human capital, right? Okay, still, those poor countries in places like uh, South Saharan areas in Africa, they do have very little level of knowledge. They have very small and vulnerable schools, and so people don't get the knowledge and the skills that they need to prosper. So we still can talk about poverty trap, even if we consider that in the 21st century, what we need to overcome poverty is more human capital, okay? Now, but let's look at this cycle of how you get stuck. So if you have the majority of people feeling hungry, you know, in very poor health conditions, and living in places that are simply not appropriate, well, it's very unlikely that these people will get enough education to try and overcome those conditions, okay? But without education, well, they will not access opportunities even when they show up. They don't show up most of the times, but even when they do, you're not going to be ready to take up those opportunities, okay? So if you can't enjoy, take up those opportunities, there's a very large chance that you, your kids, and your family will remain with very low levels of income. And that will be like almost like heritage. Next generations will receive these and they will still go through the same cycle. They feel hungry, they are in very poor shape in terms of health, they live in very stressful environments, they hardly ever can get some education, and the cycle repeats itself indefinitely. All right, so this is the idea of poverty trap. And this is not behavior economics yet, okay? We're still not talking about behavior economics. We're going to see by the end of this class, you guys will get a whole new perspective on this cycle, okay? That's my point here. I mean, that's my goal tonight to show you that this conventional way to understand poverty can be deeper if you add considerations concerning mind conditions, the effect of stress in decision making, in brain development. So, very important aspects of this same situation. All right. So, if you got here just now, good evening. Welcome back. This is our last lecture, even though next week I will still be available, but mostly to uh, present you the solution to exercises, okay? That's gonna be the topic for next meeting. But tonight, we still have to talk about one last very important issue and look at it from a behavior economics perspective, and that is poverty, okay? Extreme poverty, poverty traps, how to deal with inequality, and all those things, okay? All right, so I was just explaining here how poverty can be a cycle. You don't have conditions to get good education. If you don't have good education, we will not access the opportunities that show up, even when they show up, because most of the times they won't. And if you can't take up those opportunities, you're going to end up with a low income, and that's going to be the destiny of your kids, of your family throughout generations. All right, so this is a scary, scary picture, but we're going to add some more uh, ideas to understand how to overcome it, okay? How to overcome this cycle. All right, so let's go back and take a look at the videos that you guys watched. Would anyone make kind of a quick description of this material? Alguém poderia fazer assim uma rápida descrição do que assistiram, o que eles viram, do que trata esse filme? I, Daniel Blake. You guys have watched, right? From next week to tonight. What have you guys seen? I know, John. Yeah. Many of you are studying for tests, so I won't hold that against you, okay? I know it happens. But let me try and at least tell you what is this about, okay? In order to tell you this, I want first to refresh your memory about this thing. So far, what we have done, well, we started talking about individual behavior. We discussed bounded rationality, the prospect theory, the idea that sometimes people, rather than maximizing their satisfaction, they just try to get enough, get what is considered sufficient, right? So we actually use the term satisficing with the combination of satisfaction with sufficing. Satisfação e suficiente seria satisficiente. All right. We also discussed cognitive biases, obviously, heuristics, those regrinhas de bolso to make decisions. And we talked about persuasion too, right? Cool. Okay, so that was looking at individual behavior. Then we move a little bit up and we talked about organizational behavior. We discussed the importance of ethical behavior, but mostly we understood that sometimes unethical behavior in organizations can be the result of the acts of good people. So we're not lying to you, okay? There are some bad apples out there. But what we are trying to say is that sometimes even good people will do very bad things in organizations, right? So we talked about ethical blindness. We talked about strong contexts that can actually be stronger than reason, stronger than your ethical uh, principles, your values, right? Okay, so we talked about that too. And then we move to social behavior. Social behavior, we discuss prejudice, discrimination, peer pressure, and we talked a little bit about us versus them behavior. Not so much about social efficacy as it is discussed here, but we're going to try to bring that up here too, okay? So if I don't say anything by the end of this class, please remind me to talk about social efficacy or collective efficacy, and also as self-efficacy, okay? But then again, why am I reminding you of what we have done? Well, it turns out that each of those aspects are contemplated here. We can see those discussions in this film. So we can see individual behavior, people struggling with their own beliefs, sometimes facing their own limitations. But we also discussed how people tend to act differently when they are part of organization. So in this film, at some point, this guy here is trying to reach for some social benefits, okay? His name is Daniel, right? And he's trying to get his retirement going. He was forced to retire because he had some sort of heart attack or something like that. And he's trying to go through all the procedures, but he just can't. You know, the bureaucracy, the red tape is so incredibly large that he can't reach out and take what is his, you know, his right to retire. And we also see social behavior being discussed in this film. We are talking about how people can feel someone else's pain and try and help. We talked a little bit about solidarity. We talked a little about community values, community behaviors, right? So it's all there. So that's why I wanted so much you guys to watch this film, because you can use most of the things that we have discussed in this analysis, okay? So let me just give you like a very small summary of what is going there, or is going on there, okay? So Daniel Blake is forced to retire by this heart attack. And he had, up to that point, he had a relatively good job. He liked that job, okay? It was a low pay job, but it was fine. I mean, he had friends, he was doing fine. He dealt with old technology, and we know that as you add more technology, you add more machines to the working environment, well, some people end up losing their jobs, right? So that's also kind of a frame, a background in all the story, okay? This guy has very reasonable community relations. He has friends. He talks to people. He receives some support from some people, and he helps some other people. So you can see that those laces, those connections are important, especially when you're getting older. We can also see that the state, you know, the government also provides some sort of protection to avoid people just collapsing into poverty. But the whole point of the film is exactly this, you know. Sometimes those mechanisms to save people and to help out people when they need the most, sometimes they just don't work. And that's a tragedy, right? Okay, especially the case is when the guy is trying to reach out for some social benefits. And it turns out that in the United Kingdom at that point, they were hiring private companies to receive people, talk to people, and formalize their retirement processes. So it was like an intermediary between the citizen and the state. Então, nessa época, em particular no Reino Unido, havia essa tendência a você contratar agências privadas para servirem de intermediários entre o cidadão e o Estado. Então, se você quisesse entrar com um pedido de seguro-desemprego, ou se você quisesse entrar com o seu pedido de aposentadoria, você tinha que ir para uma agência dessas, passar lá pela entrevista, entregar todos os documentos, e essa é uma empresa contratada pelo Estado. Não é de servidores públicos, é de servidores comissionados. And it turns out that those guys, they are willing to make a profit. And if they do, they may not be so much concerned about difficult cases, right? They want to handle things fast. They want to move the, the wheel faster. And some people just get stuck in the middle of the red tape. You guys know this expression? Let me go back here and write to you red tape. We had talked about red tape before, right? You guys understand this? O que é red tape em português, gente? Como é que eu traduziria isso em português? Quem que se lembra? O que quer dizer red tape? Estou esperando alguém colocar aqui no chat. Vocês estão ruim de memória, hein? Red tape, a tradução seria fita vermelha. Mas não é fita vermelha. Red tape quer dizer burocracia. Procedimentos burocráticos que impedem você de alcançar aquilo que você quer. Ah, não, mas para você dar entrada no pedido, você tem que primeiro passar por uma triagem. Ah, não, mas para passar pela triagem, você tem que vir aqui antes das 5 horas da manhã e pegar uma ficha. Ah, não, mas para você pegar a ficha, você tem que ter pago uma taxa. Ah, não, mas para você pagar a taxa, você tem que apresentar todos os seus comprovantes, inclusive de residência, atualizado. Ah, não, mas esse comprovante de residência não serve. Tem que ser uma conta de água ou de luz paga nos últimos 3 meses. So, you create a number of obstacles to people rather than helping them out. Oh, we talked about that here too. We talked about sludge, the opposite of nudge. Remember? Nudge is when you try to help people out. Um empurrãozinho para a pessoa fazer a melhor escolha para ela mesma. Mas tem o primo malvado do nudge, que é o chamado sludge. Se a gente fosse traduzir, ia ser barreira, lama, obstáculo, alguma coisa assim. E aí a gente, na verdade, é impedir as pessoas de acessar. So, in the film, what we see is that this guy is facing up against sludge mechanisms, right? It's hard for him to access some of his rights. He has the right to retire. He had a heart attack and he has contributed to the social pension fund for a number of years. So it was only natural that he would go home and receive his money for the years that he has left. But he can't because the obstacles are too many, right? So they create this whole story. Sometimes it's touching, sometimes it's hard to watch, and sometimes you feel like you're being manipulated. So it is a controversial piece of filmography, okay? You're gonna like it, but it will touch you. And somehow you're not gonna be as comfortable as if you were just watching some Hollywood film, ok? É uma situação que às vezes é um pouco desconfortável, porque você lida com questões que são esbarram em ideologia, esbarram em crítica social, esbarram no papel de cada um de nós nessa história toda, no papel do Estado, uma certa hipocrisia sobre o que é o meu papel, o que é o papel do Estado. All right, but it's a very good film. If you guys haven't watched, I do emphasize again that you should watch. It's quite fun, okay? Now, but we have talked about mind space, right? We have talked about mechanisms that could help people make better choices. So what we see here is that the whole mind space technology was developed in the aftermath of The film, the film I, Daniel Blake, was a catalyst for a number of changes in the United Kingdom, and some of those changes ended up being the creation of this behavioral economics uh, branch of the British government. So the whole thing of trying to make the access to public services easier, more convenient, it was a response to the sort of criticism raised by the film. So I'm actually telling you the story backward because first I taught you about mind space, how you can explore and exploit some of those issues here to make public policies more effective, right? The whole idea was to get more result out of the money that the government spends trying to help people, right? And that itself was a response to a criticism, a sort of criticism that was raised by films like I, Daniel Blake. Okay. So there was a huge discussion about how hard some public services were, the access to some public services was for British people over those years. Okay. All right. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about something that we have only quickly mentioned here. Okay. I want to talk a little bit to you about social learning theory. Later on, this thing was named social cognitive theory. So you can see that has some resemblance to behavior economics, okay? All right. This is actually the creation of a guy named Albert Bandura. Let me see if I got a picture of this guy here. So Albert Bandura was this Canadian psychologist. He moved to the US and became a very famous psychologist. And actually, he was the youngest president of the American Psychology Association in history. By 43 years, he was like already very well known and respected psychologist. Okay. So he became famous first because of a series of experiments that he ran, and those were very controversial experiments. But when he was trying to answer a very specific question, he was trying to answer the question: can the kids become more violent if they watch too much violence on TV? So, how much can you learn a behavior just by watching it? Okay. So, he ran some experience with those Bobo dolls. Não sei se vocês já viram essa discussão, mas aquelas bonecas João Bobo são bonecos infláveis, assim, que tem a base de areia. Aí, se você bater no boneco, ele sempre volta a ficar em pé. Então, as pessoas podem bater no boneco quando quiser, que ele volta a ficar em pé. All right, so he used those dolls and created some situations to see whether a child would imitate violent behavior from adults, from what they see on TV, and such and such. Okay, so he was not so much concerned only with violence. He was trying to describe the very theory according to which we can learn behaviors by watching. A gente pode observar e aprender e incorporar novos comportamentos para nós mesmos a partir da observação. And so he became very famous because of that. That is still a very influential theory, and it is used in many public policies these days, okay? So, People can learn through observation. They can incorporate some behaviors, especially if they observe important people performing those behaviors. So, uma criança, quando vê a mãe, ela acaba entendendo que aquilo ali é um comportamento recomendável. Se a mãe faz alguma coisa, ela acha que pode fazer também, deve fazer também. Os pais, um irmão mais velho. Então, dependendo de quem é o modelo, a observação de um comportamento pode ser muito eficaz para as pessoas aprenderem e incorporarem aquele comportamento. But some of those behavior acquisitions, and that's an interesting choice of words, right? Aquisição de comportamento. Okay, some of those behavior acquisitions depended on your mental state. That's like saying that it is not automatic. You can use your reasoning and you evaluate if that is good, it is bad. So it is like a mediated behavior acquisition. So it is mediated by your brain, your knowledge, your history, and many other factors, okay? Então, a aquisição de computador, ela não é, a aquisição de um comportamento, ela não é automático. Ele é mediado por um processo cognitivo, racional, de avaliação, de comparação com o passado, com a história. All right, so this is very interesting psychological theory, okay? And it turns out that mental states are very important to learning. Not only learning behaviors, but learning anything. And also, learning does not necessarily lead to behavior change. Uma coisa é você aprender o comportamento que você está sendo apresentado. A outra coisa é você incorporar o comportamento aos seus hábitos. Right. Oops, sorry. My earplug fell down here. Sorry. So, this is a very interesting idea, but there are two other concepts that these guys also came up with. One is self-efficacy, and I wanted to explain that to you right now. And the other one is collective efficacy. I'm going to have to use the expressions in Portuguese just to make sure that you guys are following, okay? Então, autoeficácia é o primeiro, né? Self-efficacy. That means if a person is just about to perform some sort of behavior and he or she has never done that before, what makes this person optimistic about the result? That's what we call self-efficacy. Então, autoeficácia é aquela confiança, o otimismo que você tem em realizar um comportamento que você nunca fez você mesmo. Você pode ter visto alguém fazer. It's just like when you were a kid and you see Neymar doing this incredible dribble and you go down to your soccer field and you try to do the same. Então, os garotos no Brasil, eles veem o jogador de futebol, igual o Neymar, fazendo aqueles dribles incríveis. Ele fala, eu vou fazer isso também lá na pelada, vou descer lá para o campinho e vou tentar fazer isso também. So, you observe, it's okay. It doesn't mean you can't do that, but people will be optimistic. They will be confident that they can do. And it turns out that this optimism, this confidence, it is a kind of a prerequisite for behavior change. Então, esse otimismo, ele acaba sendo uma espécie de um pré-requisito para a mudança de comportamento. Autoeficácia. Como é que se promove a autoeficácia? De muitas formas, né? Você pode criar um ambiente livre de estresse para as pessoas tentarem coisas novas. Você pode persuadi-las. Só conversar, falar com palavras mesmo. Não, você vai se dar bem, vai lá, tenta, vai dar certo, vai lá. All right, so you can create self-efficacy either providing a healthy and stressless environment or just by trying and talking people into it, right? Tá? Então, autoeficácia não é uma coisa desimportante, embora pareça. Tá? The second one, collective efficacy. Now, this is also very, very important. And I'm going to go back and remind you why we are talking about this in the context of poverty and poverty fighting policies, okay? But then again, let me finish this, okay? Então, autoeficácia, confiança que uma pessoa tem de que ela vai tentar um comportamento novo e vai dar certo. Quase como se fosse assim, uma confiança, né? Collective efficacy seria eficácia coletiva is when you may or may not trust that your behavior just by yourself will change a lot or not. Se você achar que ao adotar um comportamento, você pode não ter o resultado esperado, a não ser que todo mundo em volta faça o mesmo comportamento, aí você está falando de eficácia coletiva. Eficácia coletiva é aquela confiança de um grupo. Um grupo fala assim, não, aqui a gente se ajuda, cada um faz um pedacinho, a gente vai fazer e vai dar certo. All right, so that's a much harder thing. Let me give you this example, okay? Suppose that you are watching TV and you are watching one of those commercials about how to fight dengue. Have you seen those? I think we mentioned those here, right? They're very funny. Aqui em Pernambuco tem aqueles comerciais sobre o mosquito da dengue. Aí tem uma senhora que vai tentar matar os mosquitos da dengue e tal. Os mosquitos são caras, assim, vestidos de mosquito, caras bem engraçados e tal. All right, so the commercial teaches you how to kill the mosquitoes, right? How to not create the conditions for the mosquitoes to reproduce, and then you're going to get rid of mosquitoes and something like that. Now, people learn that very easily. It's not hard to do. But then, in the commercial, you can see one person coming inside the house of another person and saying, I'm going to help. Let's do it. We can do it together. Aha. Now, this is what we call collective efficacy, you know? When people gather to fight against the mosquitoes. So the message in the commercial, it's so good, not only because it's trying to emphasize that you yourself can do it, but because you can help others doing too, right? You can help your neighbors to prevent all of you from getting dengue. All right, so that's collective efficacy. So it looks like, for that commercial, looks like that those guys watched my class. Os caras aprenderam na minha aula, porque eles foram lá e criaram uma mensagem publicitária sobre combate à dengue que explora todos os dois conceitos. O conceito da autoeficácia, você mesmo pode fazer, vai dar certo, vai lá e tenta, como da eficácia coletiva. Tem que todo mundo fazer junto. Então, vá, fale com o seu vizinho, ajude ele também, ou sua vizinha. All right. So, those are very important things when we're talking about poverty. Now, when this guy came up with social learning, initially he was trying to just make this point, about learning being the result of, let me just erase this thing here. Just a second. Just take out those things here. All right, thanks. Let me see if you guys can still see it. No, let me share the screen with you again. All right. Okay, now, when this guy created social learning theory, he was just trying to make this point. How much of behavioral change you can get just by watching people doing something else. Later, he developed this theory to talk about how our brains, our reasoning, our minds will mediate what we see and which of those behaviors we will incorporate, right? So he evolved the theory to talk about social cognitive theory. Então, teoria social cognitiva. And he ended up explaining a number of factors that will influence, that will impact how much of a behavior observation will lead to behavior change. And that was basically in three categories. You could have personal factors. So, for example, your life, your family life, the personality of your parents, when they raised you, what they taught you, what you've seen, your history in your family, in I mean the values you have. So they will obviously play an important role in which behaviors you tend to accept and acquire and develop. Now, we also have behavioral aspects in behavior acquisition. So it looks like redundancy, but let me explain this to you. Então, existem aspectos comportamentais sobre a aquisição de comportamento. Então, a gente falou aqui mesmo de autoeficácia. A autoeficácia é um elemento psicológico que vai ajudar uma pessoa a incorporar ou não um comportamento. And finally, you have environmental influences. So the context matters. The very good example that we have for this is those experiences in academia da cidade. Have you seen those? Quando você está andando pela rua, aí você passa por uma praça pública e vê as pessoas fazendo ginástica. E aí está tendo uma aula lá da academia da cidade. Aquilo ali é muito legal porque você levar para a população, ela estando onde estiver, você levar a oportunidade dela fazer atividade aeróbica, com instrução de um monitor, né, de um educador físico ali, então de uma forma segura, ao mesmo tempo uma forma coletiva, ao ar livre. All right, so if you don't have those contexts, it's going to be harder. It doesn't mean you can't get into a fit gym or something like that. But it's easier when it's right there, right in front of your house, right nearby your neighborhood. You can just walk down the streets and participate, right? So the context also matters, okay? So here's a more precise description of self-efficacy and collective efficacy. Let me just read this in English to you, and I will translate in Portuguese. Self-efficacy, a person's confidence in his or her ability to perform behavior that leads to an outcome. Então, a confiança que uma pessoa tem na sua habilidade de realizar um comportamento para gerar um determinado resultado. I think someone else is showing up here. Let me grant passage, access to our room. Então, pessoal, esse conceito é muito revolucionário, tá? Ele se confunde um pouco com a ideia que a gente vê todo dia falar aí de empoderamento. Mas é diferente, tá, gente? Empoderamento tem muito mais a ver com uma espécie de um posicionamento político, uma capacidade de se colocar como agente político, como saber seus direitos, saber expressar a sua opinião e tal. Self-efficacy is a more basic thing. It's about just this, confidence that you can do something you have never done, right? So you can observe someone else doing, and that will help. You can see many people doing, and then it will help too. Just verbal persuasion can help. If you have the chance to practice under stress-free or stressless conditions, well, even better. So that will all help to develop a new behavior, okay? And the other one, collective efficacy, eficácia coletiva. Belief in the ability of a group of individuals to perform concerted actions to achieve an outcome. Então, a crença na habilidade de um grupo de indivíduos de desempenhar ações articuladas para alcançar um determinado resultado. Guys, I don't know if it is immediately reasonable for you, but these two things are completely associated with poverty and with poverty reduction policies. A ideia de que você precisa dar às pessoas o senso de agência, o senso de serem capazes de sair da situação que estão e de se ajudarem mutuamente, coletivamente, de participarem uns das soluções, do enfrentamento de desafios dos outros. Essa deveria ser a base da luta pela pobreza, a luta contra a pobreza, especialmente se você tiver alguma sensibilidade para a questão comportamental, psicológica, cognitiva. I'm not saying that I'm against giving people money. I like Bolsa Família. I think it's a very fine program. But that's not enough. You have to take people out of that, comfort zone. You have to help people realize that the money they get from Bolsa Família is not enough. They should get more. They should have better lives. They are capable of achieving much more than that in life, right? So please don't get me wrong about this. I'm not talking against Bolsa Família. What I'm saying is that it is not enough. We have to do more. We have to keep Bolsa Família, and we have to understand that people may face behavioral barriers to overcome poverty. So this is one of the main messages that we have here. Como é que eu vou desenvolver uma política pública que não apenas ajude as pessoas a pagarem pelo alimento, terem uma vida um pouquinho mais digna, mas que elas superem as suas inibições, seu pessimismo, a sua falta de confiança, para tentar coisas novas, para tentar aprendizados novos, comportamentos novos que possam ajudá-las a mudar de vida. All right, so I'm not going to talk about all those elements here because there are too many. I just wanted you guys to realize how complete and how careful this guy was, Albert Bandura. He was able to describe, I don't know, maybe 14 different aspects of behavior acquisition, okay? And all of those are important and they are explained here. Now, if you have understood like this general message, let me tell you what the studies have shown again and again. Now, this message here is, for me, it was like a punch in the face. It was like something that should be obvious, but it is not. So here's the message as you get, okay? Poverty can blunt the capacity to aspire and to take advantage of the opportunities that do present themselves. Então vamos traduzir isso para português, tá? A pobreza pode nos retirar, bloquear a capacidade de desejar e de tirar vantagem de oportunidades que de fato se apresentam. You may look at me and say, come on, Luis, very few opportunities show themselves to poor people. That's why they are so vulnerable. That's why they are excluded. Look at the picture over there. How many people living in stressful conditions in Brazilian cities, okay? This is hard stuff. It's not easy. And I'm not talking anything different than that. What I'm saying is that from outside, some people look and say, oh, come on, just raise your hand, just wake up earlier and start working. Algumas pessoas preconceituosas olham para a pobreza e confundem a pobreza com falta de caráter, com preguiça, com incapacidade moral. E essa é uma visão completamente equivocada. Because if you take very smart people with masters and PhDs and you submit those people to stressful environment like people in poverty experience every single day in their lives, these smart, rich, and healthy people will make very poor decisions, just like other people in poverty. Então, os experimentos mostram que se você pegar pessoas educadas, saudáveis, o que for, brilhantes, inteligentes, e submeter essas pessoas em circunstâncias de nível de estresse semelhante ao que as pessoas em situação de pobreza experimentam todos os dias na vida dela, você vai ver essas pessoas super inteligentes e brilhantes cometerem os mesmos erros. All right, so we have to understand that the context here is very strong, okay? But then again, there's not only bad messages, we have good messages. There are three very, very much promising ways to ensure that poor people have adequate space to make the best decisions. Three things. First, simplify procedures. Oh yeah, we talked about that. Nudge. Help people making better choices. Simplify procedures. Second, target assistance on the basis of bandwidth. Now, I have to translate this phrase because it's a very strange expression that we have here, okay? Então, deixa eu traduzir isso aqui, porque senão não vai dar para entender. Focar a assistências aos pobres baseado nos seus momentos de atenção, na sua capacidade de ter atenção. So, it is still trying to help people making better choices, but now you have to understand that the conditions, the context that people are, may prevent them from making the right choice. So you have to show up at the exact moment and tell them, look, here is the option. Here is the opportunity. Don't leave this for later. This is the moment, or something like this, okay? Então, é focar na assistência nos momentos que as pessoas estão atentas e capazes de ouvir aquela mensagem. Só para dar um exemplo, falar sobre educação infantil, educação dos filhos, é no momento que você está, que um marido ou uma mulher estão esperando o neném. Então, o pré-natal de uma pessoa que mora numa comunidade carente é extremamente importante, porque é aquele momento que as pessoas estão mais aptas a ouvir sobre a criação dos filhos. So bandwidth here is like your ability to pay attention and process information. Então, escolher a oportunidade certa para ajudar no momento em que as pessoas estão aptas a receber aquela mensagem. And the last one, reduce income volatility and improve infrastructure. Bolsa Família e posto de saúde. Reduz a volatilidade de renda e melhora a infraestrutura. Seja colocando, como por exemplo na Colômbia, você colocando uma lavanderia pública dentro da comunidade. As pessoas podem ir lá usar a máquina de lavar de graça. You know what they do in Colombia? Who will come to wash the clothes? Most of the times, the mothers. So that's the right moment you can talk to mothers. As mães vêm para a lavanderia pública na comunidade para lavar a roupa dos filhos. Aquela hora, a assistente social chega e fala: Olha, quantos dos seus filhos foram vacinados? Se você quiser, eu te ajudo. Traz ele aqui na próxima semana que eu trago a vacina. All right, so this is what we're talking about. So you have to target assistance and you have to try and help overall conditions for the population. This is how you fight poverty in the 21st century. And that's not a discriminatory way to fight poverty. You're not acting on prejudice. You're actually realizing the sort of conditions that people experience. Okay? Now, I have some other examples here, and I'm just about to finish tonight. Let me just say that first, when you're developing some programs to fight poverty, you have to be able and eager to learn, right? So you start with diagnostics, you try to design your intervention, you implement and evaluate, and then you come up with better solutions. Again, you implement, you learn from it, and then you come back to a third time. And then as you move like this, at some point, your intervention will be extremely effective. Okay? So those are like evolutionary processes to develop policies. And that's what we see when you look at many, many different examples. Here is the case that you have for people uh, taking care of their water. O uso do hipofosfato de clorídrio, né, que é uma dosezinha pequenininha de água sanitária para 20 litros de água comum. Com isso, você consegue matar boa parte das bactérias e dos micro-organismos presentes na água. Na maior parte dos países do mundo, populações pobres recebem lá uma solução de, de, de um químico para fazer a clorinação da água e, com isso, evitar doenças, evitar. Now, look at this, guys. So they identified a number of obstacles. First, people do not understand how to use that chemical. So you have to give them detailed instructions. Oh, people will procrastinate. So you should deliver the bottles at home every month or something like this. Oh, people can forget. Now, you can use persuasion messages. You can use publicity. You can send them text messages on their cell phones. Oh, the product may be too expensive. Oh, you can give them out for free. So you see, in order to make the policy work, you couldn't look at a simple solution. You had to look from a different number of perspectives and then find the set of solutions that will work. Ok? É simples, é uma coisa tipo tratamento de água. Você tem água na caixa d'água da sua casa, só que essa água vem de um poço, não foi tratada. Você precisa adicionar lá umas gotinhas de um químico para garantir que você não vai ter verminoses, que você não vai adoecer. Tá, mas para fazer isso, não basta simplesmente entregar a garrafinha. Você tem que ensinar, você tem que lembrar as pessoas, você tem que recolher os vasilhames usados para reutilizar. Você tem que atuar em diferentes frentes para que você tenha certeza que aquele comportamento foi desempenhado na sua totalidade, tá? This is a diagram just to explain to you how hard it is sometimes for people to make decisions. So if you have a lot on your mind, the message of a public policy may not get through. So if you separate the message to a moment in which people can think clearly, you may end up having more effective communications. Just to finish up, I want to mention, guys, that it's one of the most amazing and at the same time one of the most scary pieces of evidences that I have seen is about how a stressful environment can affect the children's brain development. Look at this. Os estudos hoje são capazes de comprovar com muita precisão o quanto que o desenvolvimento cerebral de uma criança é afetado quando ela é exposta ali entre aqueles primeiros anos de vida, de 0 a 2, 0 a 5 anos de idade, quando ela é exposta a estresse, violência, insegurança. O efeito que essas circunstâncias têm no desenvolvimento do cérebro de uma criança são idênticos ao efeito do uso de um tóxico. É como se elas estivessem sendo intoxicadas pelo estresse. E com isso, o desenvolvimento das sinapses, das conexões nas células do cérebro fica aquém do que precisava ser. And you can measure that in a number of ways. You can talk about how large is their vocabulary at certain ages, how large is the memory, how well their memory work, visual spacing processing, the capacity to maintain attention. So all of those will be affected by the quality of the environment that you had at your first 5 years of age. And by the way, this guy here, James Heckman, this guy got a Nobel Prize in economics because he took a very large data set and he analyzed those data very, very carefully to show you that that is so. I mean, that depending on the kind of environment a kid has from 0 to 5 years old, that will have a huge impact on what sort of adult you will have later on. Now, let me just be careful here. It doesn't mean that you were born poor, you have no future in life. That's not what this guy is saying, okay? It's not deterministic like that. What he is saying is that compared to a kid who had very good first 5 years of life, uh, the competition is not fair. A kid who had tough conditions from 0 to 5 years old, they will not reach their full potential. These kids will not reach their full potential. They may develop, they may have success, but even if they do, the kind of success that they will have will probably like 20 or 30% lower than the ones that they could have if they didn't have such hardship at early ages. Okay? So this is both economics and behavior economics, and it's a message very important for all of us who want to think about what to do with the knowledge that we got here. We have spent 14, 15 weeks talking about behavior economics. If I had like a last message to you, well, the most precious way you can use this knowledge is by taking care of kids, because that can make a huge difference throughout their whole lives, okay? All right, then, let me see if I have any questions, any comments or suggestions. Deixa eu ver se eu tenho aqui algum comentário, alguma sugestão, alguma dúvida. Hoje vocês estão especialmente mais quietinhos. Eu acho que está todo mundo cansado. Deve estar todo mundo vindo de prova ou se preparando para fazer prova, loucos para entrarem no feriado de 7 de setembro. Então vamos lá, pessoal. Alguma pergunta, algum comentário ou alguma sugestão? No? It's okay. Let me just say this last announcement, okay? You guys have the 7th list of exercise due tomorrow. So be careful. Make sure you submit your answers by tomorrow, ok? Tem a 7ª lista de exercícios, tem que ser enviada até final do dia amanhã. E a última lista de exercícios vai ter que ser feita para a próxima semana. Eu vou anunciar lá no nosso grupo de WhatsApp e vou colocar no Classroom. Mas vai ser a última, a 8ª lista de exercícios vai ser lançada nos próximos dias. Já na sexta-feira vocês vão ter acesso a ela. E aí vocês vão ter até a próxima quarta-feira ou quinta-feira, acho que é quinta-feira, para submeter as respostas, tá bom? Eu vi aqui uma pergunta no chat. O João Romeu falou assim, eu gostaria de fazer o meu TCC nessa área, o que o senhor acha? Ô João, eu acho ótima ideia. Se você realmente estiver sério em relação a isso, comente comigo no privado, lá no WhatsApp, que eu te mando exemplos de monografias que eu orientei, TCCs que eu orientei, de colegas de vocês, e que trabalhavam com economia comportamental. Teve um rapaz que trabalhou com ancoragem de preços, então como que a gente vendo um certo número de referência, a gente acaba fazendo decisão, tomando aquele número como referência, mesmo que não tenha nada a ver. E teve uma outra pessoa que trabalhou com mensagens publicitárias. E aí ela falou assim, essas influenciadoras digitais, que tipo de mensagem que elas usam? Elas utilizam mais mensagem de persuasão ou elas utilizam mensagem realmente para tentar ajudar você a fazer boas escolhas? Então ela ficou fazendo aquela comparação sobre persuasão e economia comportamental, nudge, empurrãozinho, e para isso ela fez análise de mensagens de 2 ou 3 lá, influenciadoras digitais muito famosas, aquelas pessoas que têm 1 milhão de seguidores e tudo mais. Então, se alguém quiser fazer o seu TCC na área de economia comportamental, me avisa pelo privado, que eu posso mandar alguns TCCs que foram feitos sob minha orientação e que deram muito certo. E aí, eventualmente, você pode pensar se você vai fazer também. Legal, João? Muito bem. Susan também está pensando. Que bom. Fico feliz, gente. Significa que vocês gostaram do assunto, né? Eu sou suspeito para falar. Eu sou apaixonado por essa discussão. Mas, vamos lá. Some other question, comments, or suggestions? No? Okay, everybody, so this is it. I'm going to stop recording here, and I'm going to be here for a few more minutes if you want to talk to me. Otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday. There will be some exercises, last list of exercises. It will be out on Friday, but there is no homework this Friday, okay? I will just show up here on Wednesday, basically to talk about exercises, give you the solutions, and explain to you anything that you may have made a mistake or something, okay? All right. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.